Hey DBI, it's iRiz, and this is going to be a roleplay review for a Hobb's Tale. I think it's actually called Minas Mordred, a Hobb's Tale. But this is a log by the writer of Ikenbon for the character Zofu, and it is going to be more than just a roleplay review. We're going to be doing a lot of talking. I don't know how long this video is going to be. In my head, I'm assuming somewhere closer to 40 minutes. So, smoke 'em if you got 'em. This is going to be a long one. And the reason that this is going to be a long one is because this is not just going to be a review over a log. There is a lot more to unpack here in this story, in this tale, for not a whole lot of words. So, we're going to be doing some jumping back and forth. I am going to kind of like explain everything that happens in the log to the best of my ability. And then we're going to talk about three things. The three things we're going to talk about is going to be the story, the character, and the writer. And the story and the character are going to kind of go hand in hand. But with everything that happens in this log, I think it's a really good chance and opportunity for us to kind of break some things down, not just for Zofu, not just for roleplay logs, but for a lot of things in general. Kind of like an all-encompassing, interconnecting experience together. Because I think that's the big impact that this log actually has on DBI. So, as it's stated that this is a Hobb's tale, this story is not written in the perspective of Zofu. It's actually written from the perspective of, I'm going to say, Flamance. And I know I'm probably butchering that. I'm sorry. I even asked Ike earlier, like, hey, how do you pronounce this name? And I'm still going to butcher it. But the way that it's written, it's Flamence. And I know Ike and I both have played, and a lot of people have, the Dragon Age games. And Flemeth, I know her name is an E, but it just kind of comes off the tongue as Flemence. So if I say that, I'm sorry. It's supposed to be Flamence. I'm sorry. But it's from the perspective of this character. And this character is actually a Hobb who is steward to Castle Blackley. And that is very important. That's very important. It's a very important theme all throughout this log. Yeah, it's basically opening up by starting off and telling us, like, kind of when this happens. And it's given a year, but since we don't really have an in-game calendar system, we don't know if it's been in the past, been in the present. But it's basically like how they came to meet Zofu. And this is where we're going to take the first pause and talk about one of the three. And the first one is going to be the character. And so for you guys that don't know, Zofu is a character that has been around for a very long time in our roleplay setting, but not very recently. Outside of the things that have kind of happened very recently, and I'm talking within like the last 2 or 3 months, actually since about the start of combat month, we haven't really seen much of Zofu other than the stuff that kind of happened with Lai and his daughter in roleplay, even like back in the middle of the summer. So I'm going to say beginning of summer is the last time, or is the first time we've seen Zofu in probably 2 years. There was a log called the Strix, and the Strix really put some conflict, some very, very, very tight conflict between Zofu and Nova, to the point where both of those characters weren't seen on page for a very long time. And Nova from the Strix came back during the Proving. The Proving, I want to say, was 2 years ago, so it's been at least 3 years since Zofu has been seen on page in the abundance that he is now. And he kind of came back and had this new title. He was the Lord of Castle Blackley. And from what we know is that actually he did have a little bit after the Strix. I lied, but he had this interaction with Majime on Hydia, where the Institute was blown up, and he went through and was kind of like cleaning up and picking the bones, and Majime kind of went through and slaughtered the people that were still there and the people that were there for the cleanup. But he hasn't really been seen since. And he comes back and he says, like, I am the Lord of Castle Blacklay. And nobody really batted an eye, because sure, why not? But we never found out how. We never found out, why even. And from everything that's been going on with the character currently, that has always kind of been a big thing with this character. He has always mentioned it somewhere, to the point where if you don't know that that's his role now, you just haven't been paying attention. So the story that connects with this is that this is finally the story that we get to see, like, how that came to be, sort of. And it opens up with there being a lot of backstory, there being a lot of world building happening in the opening of this log. And this is why I think this log is so important, because we know that it's like the cliffs of Shah Lenore Vale, and there's these beasts called Hellkites, and we get a really deep description of where Blacklay is supposed to be, like, kind of like it has a place. And it, in the foothills of the Shah Lenore Valley, there is this tar pit swamp known as Vesgos. And even Vesgos has its own history. And in only a paragraph do we know, like, there was a battle long ago, and these are tar pits, and they're noxious, and there is just no kind of safe way to get through them other than the Road of Cairns. And that's kind of what Zofu has got to lead his people through to get to Minas Mordred. And all of this is, like, just really building up to the point where we have on the world anvil Eon, right? We have the epitome of nightmares. We have cities and places for it, but we've never really, like, described the topography of it. No one's ever really dove into this planet, this place, and explained what it's like on there. Explained what the gravity feels like, what the sky looks like, what's in the air, what does it smell like. And we're starting to get that. This is that world building that we're getting to, which is why I think that this log is so special, because it's the first one that really, really tries to explain that, or I will say it's the first one that does it well. Whoops, almost lost my notes. And we're getting, like, all of these things, like there's grimoires written by these people, and we're like, okay, well, who's that? And it's like, well, this is this person, and it's almost like, this is almost like another story that we have to tell, and there's more things, more depth, and more backstory, all from just, and I'll show you guys here, all from just this first paragraph here. Like, all in here is that. Excuse me. And then it kind of tells, like, how Zofu approached the dream halls, which that's what this is. This is his great work, his treasure. And he goes on to say that, a little later in the log, that when he is done, when he is dead and gone, he hopes that this library exists, and that will be his legacy, right? No family, no kids, no techniques that he wants to pass down. He doesn't want to be a master and have students and have his name. He wants this library to persist past him. It is what he is. So with that is like the very first time we learn about Zofu, about what he even wants, about why he's been doing everything that he's been doing, right? And I know I asked Ike this in game earlier today, and it probably threw him off. It probably threw him for a loop. But I asked Ike, I was like, hey, when did Zofu's creation date happen? And Zofu's creation date was December 10th, 2019. All right, so we're going to 2020, 2021, 2022. We're almost into 2023. We're almost 4 years into the creation of this character. And I think finally now, with this log, I'm going to say it, I think Ike has finally figured out who Zofu is. With this log, he has figured out this character and is like, this is who this guy is. This is who I have always wanted him to be. I found it. I found the core of this character. Because I don't know if there's anybody that is still active on chat who has roleplayed more with Zofu than I have. And he has definitely changed. He's definitely changed over the years. Because when he first came to Page, some of the first iterations that I remember seeing of him was always how he had this regalness to him. He was trying to be, like a prince, but he always was talking about like his single horn and how he was a tiefling, and that was like his thing. He was like this unicorn demon prince, right? Who had some bite and wit with his tongue, and he could turn on his evil side. And he was never really to be trusted, but he was never this. He was never this guy in this roleplay. Like, as I'm reading this roleplay, like the guy that's in this text here, I don't see him wearing a power bottom hoodie. I don't see him like casually joking. He's just all about business. Like this Zofu stands on business, like at all times, and he's about his shit. And what is interesting about this story, right? Because we've talked about the character a lot. What's interesting about this story is that this story is written in the perspective of Flemons. And that is such a great tool to use when writing, because you can have, like all of this actual emoting that's happened here, it's orange because it's not coming from the perspective of Zofu, it's coming from the perspective of someone else. And that allows you to create a character that may seem bigger and larger than they are because it's coming from the perspective and the mind of this person. So to a Hobb, even though, like I hate to even say it, but even though he's only tier 2, he's the greatest demon that this guy may have ever encountered, right? Because there are definitely times, where Zofu will say something, and anytime he says it in this red text, like he's invoking the tone of his father. He is speaking in a commanding and demanding way that his father would, and letting people know like he is still part of a totem clan. He is still he's still not to be trifled with, and he's being very serious, and he's being very deadly, and you are on a razor's edge. But does that carry the same weight when speaking to Indon, of all people, right? Like, of just simply, like, there's a part, and I know I'm kind of, like, way off track, but there's a part later on where Flemons mentions that, oh, Zofu, yeah, you're a half-breed, right? You have a horn, but you're also born in a womb, so some people will call you a halfling, and he instantly is like, yeah, some foolish people who want to die. You can't make that threat easily to someone either equal to you or way stronger than you, but you can to a Hobb. And it can feel that way to a Hobb. So that's why I think this is a really good tool used. And then not only is it that, but we have like this part up here, which is literally him kind of narrating to the reader as if it is his own writing, right? So the white text is, Flement's really just saying like, hey, please undo it. This is me writing to you. And then the orange text is us viewing the scene from Flemis's perspective, right? So think of it like a movie. A movie that is a narrator that is the main character telling you about something. And they don't talk to you the whole time. Part of them, they have to stop talking and you just watch what happened. That's this part. And the jumping back and forth is kind of like, so this is this scene. Then I'm going to either speak about, what happened previously, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happens next, and then we get to see that scene, right? And it's really cool. Like the story. So the story of it is Zofu takes over Castle Blackley, goes into the Dream Halls. Here we are. And he basically gives Flemis a duty or a choice to follow him in his ambition or die, which easy choice for anybody. And then over time, you get to have this story that is these two bonding, these two getting to know one another through, sharing wine, and Flemis gets to read books. And when I first read this, my initial response when I was typing up a review for this was this relationship that these two people have is exactly what I wanted for Rizian and Zofu to be like. I'm just your most trusted advisor. We are like, if there's anybody that you can't talk to, you can talk to me, right? Like, tell me whatever. I want to be there for you. Like I wanted Rizian to be that, and Rizian wants Rizian to be that. And he's not. Like, after reading this, I'm like, yeah, there's no way, because he already has his confidant. He already has the person that he trusts within this castle, while also having a devoted servant, right? And sorry, I'm kind of going through all of this. And yeah, so like telling it from Flemis's perspective, there's a part where he's talking about like, there was a woman, and there's like some things that he doesn't quite understand about Zofu. And at that point, like when I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, so this what does Zofu feel? Like what does he feel? And I will say this, like when I told Ike that I loved this log, I think the best way to describe it is that he was, I won't say dismissive, but I think he was just disappointed. That's the best way I think I could describe it. He was disappointed that I was so elated about how much I liked it, and that I wasn't going to be able to actually review it properly, because it's all going to come from a place of emotion of like, oh yeah, it's great, this is great, blah blah blah. So I am going to admit to you guys now, I had to read this log twice, and while it's not a super long log, like there's definitely been way more pages that have been written in a solo, it takes a while to kind of get through and to kind of understand. And I felt terrible, and I still feel kind of bad, because there have been, like, the backlog on the forums is kind of big, and there's other stuff that I could have spent time doing after I read it once. I could have just read it, reviewed it, and moved on. But again, I feel like there's a lot here that we kind of have to look at. So upon my second read, I liked it a little less, but I understood it a lot more. And I think it's the reason I'm able to talk about it so well. But one of the things that I didn't care for the second time that I read it is that, yeah, it took me a while to understand that this is not a log about the character Zofu. This is a log about the character Flemens. It's theirs. If there was something I would say to Ike is that, like, if you don't make this an NPC follower, or at least a reoccurring NPC, we don't know their fate. We don't know their fate after the battle, because this is just kind of like the opening to that. But man, you would be doing the mud a huge disservice if this character doesn't exist outside of these solos. And once I understood that it was not a Zofu log, I was like, okay, so maybe not awarded so high, but it is still a really good read. But I want more Zofu, right? I think if there is something that this log needed, it was actually Zofu. Because while they are getting to know one another, and that's what a lot of like the middle section of the log is there are things that like you don't really need to know about Zofu in the moment that we understand from Flemis's perspective what's going on. We understand why it's going on. So let's just keep going. So Zofu and Flemis kind of get really close. They get really tight. That's what like the beginning of the middle of the section of this is. He tells him, about Nova, and Flemis doesn't really understand it, but he's like, yeah, I don't get it, but there was something that happened, and that Flemis gets to understand, and we get to understand that Zofu is a creature of all things magic. Like that's his thing, and he calls himself a sorcerer, which fitting, right? And he does come off kind of as, I won't say standoffish, but he then kind of becomes hard to read. And there is a twist. So there's a twist that to get through the swamps, Zofu just comes out and says, we need to hang 13 men. And instantly, like this is, I think this has been like a year of them being together. So they've got a really tight-knit relationship. He says, we need to hang 13 men. And when I got to this the second time, my immediate question was, why is it that this is Flemis's labor? Why is it that this is his job, his duty? And I did ask, like, well, because there's a twist, and I'm like, well, if you knew the answer all along, if you knew that, then why didn't you do it? And that's why I had to reread it, because immediately after I wrote that question down, the very next line explains that. But what I would have liked more, what would have made this a more Zofu log, would have been figuring out how he got to that point, right? So he is forced to answer a riddle, and he does answer it, but we don't get to see Zofu's struggle with that. And that's kind of my big issue and takeaway with this, is that Zofu just kind of gets the answers. He just has the answers, and there's never really conflict for him. The conflict is with Flemis, which again, I keep coming back to it. It's his log, right? It literally is his log. Like if I could go back, I would just say, like, yeah, this character gets all the RPP because it's their progression. Like literally everything is from them. But yeah, they get to this point where they have to get through these pits, these tar pits, and Zofu just says, like, hey, 13 men must die. We have to hang them and cut off their hands, and you have to bring them to me. And he says it in the red text. He's invoking the will and the temperament of his father. It is not a question. It is a command. It is a demand. It must happen. Um, and so you as the reader, right? If you're reading this, you have the same reaction as Flemeth. It's like, what the why? Why would you just need to kill? And he says 13 must die. He doesn't say men. He just says, no, actually he does. He says we need to hang 13 men, and then he switches it to say 13 must die. And you know, minor hang up is that is just 13 must die. I would have gone through and erased the actual 13 men part and just kept it at 13 must die, because then the riddle becomes a little bit easier to understand. And yeah, like the whole while we do see that Zofu's always reading, he's always going through grimoires, so he is kind of in the background putting the pieces together. But again, if it were a Zofu log, like we would see that he is trying to figure this out. He hits this wall, he goes to one book, and like even just like some frustration that he can't figure it out, or maybe he feels close to an answer but it's not the right answer. That would have made this his story. But all we see is, again, and I'm not trying to say it like it's negative, but we just see it from the perspective of someone else. And we also get to see that the why is, and the big reveal is that there are these things planted into the ground, these mandrakes. And they are the ones that are causing the Hobbs and everybody to kind of go crazy. And even Flemeth talks about like he himself just feels so angry and so upset, and he knows that something is here and it's causing all these people, all the other Hobbs, all the other people in this caravan that have stopped in Vesgos to kind of lose their shit. Right? And then they find out like, oh, it's these things. Oh, okay, yeah. He's like, I don't need to kill 13 Hobbs. What was I thinking? Like, why would he just have me go off and kill our own people? He's demanding, and he's not cruel like that, right? Like, that's not the Lord that I've got to know. Everything has a reason. Like, what is the reason? And you know, again, this is Flemeth's labor, so he is giving us the like, why, like, what's going on? Why can't I figure this out? And then the aha moment is like, oh, it's these things. It's these things. We have to kill these 13 things. Oh my God, he was telling me the whole time. He knew, you knew. And then Flemeth has that reaction of like, you knew, and why didn't you tell me? Like, why, what is going on? And there was a reason for it, right? That everything that happens in this log was taken with so much care, because everything's for a reason. And the reason is a part of a small section that I skipped. There's a section where Zofu and Flemeth are talking once again, and they're talking about true names. And I will say that I feel like this section is probably the weakest of the log, only because I feel like just for a little bit it was over-explained. But basically, true names in demon lore, and Ike does a very good job of this, of taking what you and I, the human beings sitting in our chairs, understand of demonic lore and spellcast and witchcraft, is that if you know a demon's true name, you hold power over them. And the way that he explains it is that a true name is the closest thing to someone's true nature. So some people's true nature is to serve Castle Blacklight. That would be Flemeth's. You know, Zofu kind of, I think he knows his true name, and he, you know, obviously isn't going to tell anybody, because if somebody were to figure it out, they would hold power over him. And again, that's another reason why I wanted to talk about this, because this is another part of demonic lore that maybe some new characters who are demons want to roll with, right? Kind of like I mean, since I'm an old head and I can only refer back to old anime from the early 2000s, kind of like in Bleach, like all the swords had a name and they had their real name. They had their Shikai and their Bankai. And once you learned their name, they got stronger. So maybe, maybe that's a demonic transformation for somebody. Their true name for all the Final Fantasy 14 players, their true name is Hades, and this is their true form, and that's their first transformation. Who knows? But back to what we're talking about. the reason that Zofu did not tell Flemis, hey, this is why we have to do this, go dig up these things that are causing everybody to go crazy. It's kind of like, he's like, this is your labor. I gave this job to you so that you could serve me, because that's who you are. That's your true name. That's your true essence. And it's a wonderful moment. Like, again, everything kind of goes together. Everything kind of fits together in this story so well. And it, again, is kind of like I'm Zofu, nothing ever goes wrong for me. And I'm not trying to say that that's what always happens, but like, that's just how this was set up. Like, there was, again, for looking at it through like the lens of an admin, right? If I'm just reading this story, I'm like, okay, well, this character, doesn't matter who the writer is, this character, this went through kind of nothing, but the other character, Flemis, is the one that did everything. So this is sort of like a NPC follower log. It's like, that's really good. So here's your roleplay points for that. And this is not something that can, sustain. I don't think everybody can do something like this. But let's take Saliath, for instance. This is Mac talking about Saliath and how his training is going, right? And again, once that clicked like that, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. And so yeah, they dig up these mandrakes, cut off their hands like they're instructed. They hang them as instructed, and burn their hands. And their hand being burnt serves as the thing that leads into the Road of Cairns. And that is the puzzle that has finally been figured out. So this whole time, like, I'm going to come back here. This whole time is Zofu trying to figure out how to get from point A to point B. That's it. And he's constantly reading. So we do learn about Zofu in this log. We do learn, about him, and he does deserve his roleplay points if you look at it from the perspective of, well, he did kind of struggle. He did go on a journey. We just don't know how he felt about it. But he's always reading. He's always in a book. He's always, leafing through something. And it's presented to us. We just don't get to see how he reacts to hitting a wall, right? Which, again, for a one-off, it's fine. If it's always that way, then I think it would even become stale to roleplay that. You can't. I don't know. Maybe it's fun that, like, your character's just saying, I'm just sitting around reading a book. That's just what I do. Oh, they gotta go stop the Empire. Okay, give me about a month. Let me find the. It's just not fun. Maybe. But that's the story, right? And then for the character, like I said, they kind of go hand in hand. A lot of the things that I wrote down in my notes here, the character here of Flemis was well written, definitely had their own feel to them. And again, I would be so sad if this character doesn't come back in some way. I would feel remiss if they don't show up again. personally, it's like, damn, I can't roleplay Rizian like this because I don't even think I could roleplay my actual character as good as the way this character is, and they were supposed to do the same damn thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the story of the log. And then I said that there's three things we're going to talk about. There's the story, there's the character, and then there's the writer. And with the writer, this is where I'm going to get into a lot of trouble, I guess. Oh, stuff. Rip my page. This is a very Ikenbon log. It's a very well thought out, well planned out story from someone who has been probably 15 years now, playing the role of dungeon master and writing and probably reading and researching about all things fantasy. Ike tends to really like high fantasy but low magic for his setting. Example, Leaf, right? Even here, there is combat, and it's a spear being thrown. There were no energy blasts. Like nobody blew up a mountain. Nobody was screaming and powering up. It was all very kind of like the magic that happened was spell components and just kind of natural things, burning hands of certain things to get through. It's more like science, right? So would I say that Zofu is Ike's best character? Because I loved this log. I loved this log more than pretty much everything that Koshoro has shown us, because like this like demon magic shit is also like my vibe. I'm also very high fantasy, low magic. But I would say no, Zofu is not Ike's best character, because what I guess my challenge would be is to like, how do we get this character outside of his realm also interacting with other characters, right? Like I feel like if there is a struggle that Ike has with Zofu, it is that. It is when, he just doesn't have people who are bowing and kneeling to him and I guess giving his character that same level of respect. And it's weird because like Zofu doesn't really come off as the type of person of like, I need that. In what he would say. Like, I don't feel like Zofu would say, like, I need people to bow to me, I need people, because he clearly, like, kind of doesn't want Rizian's undying devotion and attention. Rizian's almost like a puppy who found a master and just wants to, like, love him and please him, and, like, he doesn't want that. He wants a Flemens. He wants somebody who can be given an order and hate the order and, like, argue with him, right? So I'm not saying that Zofu himself wants that, but I feel like where he shines is in that perspective. And maybe it's just because like everybody looks so much better in their own solo. So I think I would just want to see more of Zofu with other people outside of Castle Blackley, which sucks because like that's his home, like that's his space. and Ike has been leading to him being here for a very long time, and again, it's been 4 years, and he finally figured out this is my character. So now I just want to see that character with other people. I really feel like, yeah, you nailed it on this one, and even at the very end of this log, he even calls it Shadow Earth, right? Like a cute little nod and touch back to the actual mud. So good job, buddy. I hope that for those of you who made it with us for the 40 minutes, I hope that this was a little bit better of a review from my end to give actual perspective of what's going on and why something can be good, and you know what makes it easy to read. It makes it a fun read. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm still getting over being sick yet again, but I guess my closing thoughts would be just I'm really excited for the next part. I feel like the next part is going to be more action heavy, because these guys did a number on Zofu. I don't know if you guys have really been paying attention, but from what I can remember just off the top of my head is that they take an arm, they take an eye, and I also think that they break his horn. I might be wrong on that last one, but I know that when Zofu is going after Minas Modred, he gets like messed up and massacred. So I'm excited to see part 2. And yeah, Ike, good job. I'll see you guys on the chat channel.